One study on marriages found that 65% of couples reported communication was their biggest challenge. For myself, the main advice I received on communication when first getting married has not always been helpful because it isn't always practical. So I want to offer the correction I found in working with couples. See, with each partner coming in with their own baggage and history, communication can be made all the more difficult when we are triggering each other in the day-to-day. How do we stop the cycle of reactivity and start communicating in ways that we understand each other and are understood? I'm Daniel, professional counselor and hobby baker, and today we're making a Jalapeño Cheddar Sourdough loaf and breaking down my top 3 tips from working with couples on navigating marriage triggers and communication and reducing reactivity. A lot of the most common advice on communication skills emphasize making sure there is understanding. However, some advice isn't always practical in the marriage context. When I was freshly married, I often heard it was helpful to summarize what I was hearing to ensure I was understanding what my wife's message was, as that might give her the opportunity to clarify anything I had misheard or misunderstood. The summarizing ability is also a core skill that is taught and emphasized in my training to become a therapist. And to be clear, it's a great skill to develop to make you a better listener in a general sense. But while this is a great skill to have in understanding what a person is saying and attempting to help process through something, it isn't always applicable in a conversation with your spouse, especially when one or both of you are triggered. We all have what we might call raw spots that can be rubbed by our partner and cause us to be reactive and potentially start a conflict or negative cycle. These raw spots might be the product of our own baggage and negative core beliefs about ourselves. When a raw spot is rubbed, that person might go straight into the lower parts of their brains and literally have less access to their prefrontal cortex. That person's brain is being flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, so it's impractical to assume that in a triggered state, I might be able to clarify and ask my wife, what I'm hearing you say is ... For example, if I have the core belief that I am not good enough, this could be triggered by my wife's commentary on the state of our home and her desires to fix up portions of it. Her saying, our house is such a wreck, I wish we had more time to make it look nice. If triggered, I might get upset and sulk or walk away and shut down, or yell something back at her about how much I work or how hard I work, or how little I've seen her doing around the house lately. All of these reactions could come from this trigger to my own core belief. While it would be wise and beneficial for me to work on my own stuff and continue to work through and reframe this negative belief that I have, that won't help our relationship in the here and now when I was triggered. So my first tip on communicating through triggers or around triggers is that it is the responsibility of the speaker to clarify what the partner that is clearly triggered may have misheard or misunderstood. It is your job as the communicator to ensure clarity when you notice your spouse is reacting in a way that is disproportionate in intensity to what is said. This means that if I say something not expecting my wife to react strongly, but she responds very strongly with like a 9 out of 10 reaction, it is on me to say, wait, hold on, I'm curious, what did you just hear me say? Because when we're triggered, as I mentioned, we lose access to the prefrontal cortex, so it would be very difficult and maybe even near impossible for her to be able to ask curiously what I meant by whatever I said. That's why it's on me, the non-triggered partner, to be curious and clarify in that moment. My second tip at reducing reactivity and navigating triggering conversations is indeed to do your own work. I often hear in the therapy room one partner who is very afraid to trigger their spouse, and so it almost turns into a sense of tiptoeing around them, fearing accidentally triggering them. While it can be your job to be aware of your spouse's triggers and make conscious attempts not to trigger them, it is also your spouse's responsibility to work through their triggers and begin to reduce reactivity, and vice versa. And my third tip is to try to introduce more playfulness into your communication in day-to-day. In observations of family systems or marital systems, reactivity is often a result of chronically anxious and emotionally regressed systems. And one of the first things to leave that system is a sense of playfulness. Playfulness is a mammalian thing. Reptiles cannot be playful because their brains just don't do it. Like if you have a pet snake, even if you want to play with it, it will not be playful back to you in a way that maybe a dog could. But if we're constantly in our reptilian brain or our limbic system, it can be easy to get stuck in cycles of reactivity. So playfulness can help fight against the reactivity or the atmosphere of reactivity in the relationship. I would say feel free to explore what works for you and your spouse in being playful. But an example that has worked for my wife and I is sometimes I will joke and say something along the lines of, "So what you're saying is you don't love me," when she might complain about how messy the house is. And this is a dynamic we have, so she might respond in that same cadence, saying, "No, I'm saying I love you, and our house is a mess." It might be silly, but it helps us not take ourselves or each other so serious in other moments and keeps us playful in our communication. Let me know what resonates with you in the comments, and if you'd like to hear more about communicating through specific triggers like money issues, click here to watch this video.